In life, if you're doing something and you're asking if the police are around, it probably means you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, which is exactly what's going on here when this pilot asks if the feds are around.
You don't have any feds in there, do you?
Now, he could be asking about the feds, like federal law enforcement, like the FBI or somebody like that, but I think what he's asking about is the FAA feds, which is basically the pilot's version of the police, because these guys can take away your license. Now, all this is happening here in Georgetown, South Carolina, which is just down the road from Charleston, South Carolina, which is where I used to fly the Dreamlifter out of all the time, which is going to become relevant here in just a moment. Check out this audio.
Georgetown, Unicom in traffic. It's 111 Echo Alpha. It's about 5 miles to the north, and it's going to be entering a left downwind 5 landing. At 1 o'clock, it's left downwind 5, Georgetown. At 1 o'clock, left base, and left base final, runway 5, Georgetown. And Georgetown now, 1 o'clock is on the left downwind, runway 23.
What? This guy starts out on a downwind for runway 5 right here, which should put him roughly right here when he says this.
At 1 o'clock, it's left downwind 5.
And then he says he's on a left base and turning final, which means he's making this turn right here, which is perpendicular to the runway. That's the base leg. And then final, of course, is when you're lined up with the runway.
At 1 o'clock, left base, and left base final, runway 5, Georgetown.
Then he says he's on a left downwind for runway 23, which means he's now over here.
And Georgetown now, 1 o'clock is on the left downwind, runway 23.
Nothing about going missed on runway 5 or anything like that. He's just magically on this downwind from runway 23, probably at like 100 or 200 feet. He doesn't really say what his altitude is, so if you're flying around there, you wouldn't really know where he's at. And in this particular case, the pilot is correct that the traffic flow for runway 5 and 23 are both left traffic, which means that if you were landing on runway 5, your traffic pattern would look like this, and if you were landing runway 23, your traffic pattern would look like this. So either he is familiar with that airport or he has done his homework, and based off of what happens later in this audio, I'm going to guess it's because he's familiar with his airport. But not all airports have that same traffic pattern. Some, when they're landing one direction, have a left traffic pattern, and then when they're landing the other direction, they have a right traffic pattern. In this case, he is correct. It's left traffic pattern on both directions. As you can see, runway 5 and 23 both run on a left traffic pattern. And you should know, right now, I'm in Azerbaijan. And if you're not familiar with where that is in the world, it's right here. And don't worry, a few years ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to find on the map either. A company, Olafly, reached out to me, and I thought their product was super relevant for what I'm typically doing on international travel, because their service covers over 200 destinations with unlimited data, and their plans start for under $4 a day. Now, I use the global unlimited plan because I'm changing continents and countries every single day, but not everybody does that, and they actually have regional plans. These 15 different regional eSIMs allow for you to be hopping around different countries within a continent, and it lets you have data almost anywhere in that region. Now, personally, when they reached out to me, I thought, oh, okay, are you really going to have something in a place like Azerbaijan? Because it's not really exactly a tourist hotspot, but they do. Which honestly shocked me a little bit, but it just shows how many places in the world that they're able to cover with these eSIMs. If you're traveling and want to skip the chaos of having multiple SIM cards as you go around a different region, these eSIMs honestly make it a lot easier because you're able to have data right there when you land and you're not having to switch things out in your phone. They actually gave me a code, which I'll put on the screen here, and if you use that code or you click the link that I put in the description, you actually save a bunch of money because, well, they know pilots are really cheap. Now, this pilot is forgetting to do something very, very important while he's making this transmission as he's going around this airport, which most pilots learn when they start their private pilot training. He keeps saying where he is, which is important, and he's sharing his tail number, which isn't so relevant, but he's missing something really important.
At 1 o'clock, it's left downwind 5.
At no point does he say what type of aircraft he is, and this is very important when you're dealing with the CTAF, which is a common traffic advisory frequency, because you can't necessarily see the plane. You want to know what's going on and what kind of plane is around you. And with the 3 minutes of research that I did while making this video, it said that it was a Cessna 310, which is this type of aircraft. But let's say this is me, and I'm coming in on, for example, a Dreamlifter, and I'm making these same type of radio calls, and I'm failing to mention that I'm a 747. I'm just coming in the traffic pattern, I'm like, hey, I'm on a downwind, it's registration number 747BA, and someone else is in there flying a Cessna 172, and you might be thinking, oh, Kelsey, but you know, big 747s don't fly into airports like this, and you would be wrong, because I have done exactly this in a 747, and it is super important, because if I'm coming in on a 747 and just saying my registration number or tail number, this plane that might have a guy in a very small, let's say a 152, a very small plane, he's just hearing, okay, registration tail number, and this guy's over here, and I'm on a 5-mile final to land on this runway. It could be at night, he may not know what's going on, he might be a new pilot, and if he got into the wake turbulence of a 747 in a small little plane, it's going to be a major problem in his plane. But this pilot just keeps transmitting where he is and his registration number.
At 1 o'clock, it's left downwind 5.
And the other thing you'll notice when you look at this sheet here is that the Unicom frequency and the CTAF frequency are the exact same frequency, but they are not the same. At the beginning, he says that he's transmitting on Unicom, but that essentially is the frequency used when you want to contact somebody on the ground. So if you're trying to find out about, like, hey, do you guys have fuel or anything like that, that's who you're talking. Where do I park when I land there? That's your Unicom frequency. Your CTAF frequency is what you're transmitting so the pilots around you know where you are, what you're doing, what kind of aircraft you are, what you're planning to do. That's where you're transmitting on the CTAF. Now, it just so happens in this case it's the same frequency, but he's saying Unicom and then transmitting what he should be saying on the CTAF. I guess it's not really a major deal because it's the same frequency, but there is a distinguish between the two that you need to know. One is for people on the ground and one is for people in the air. So if you're a plane that's coming into this airport and this guy's making a transmission like this,
at 1 o'clock, it's left downwind 5.
you know roughly where he is, but you don't know what kind of plane he is, you don't know what type of altitude he's at, and that can make things very uncomfortable because CTAF is essentially where pilots are air traffic controlling themselves, which honestly still makes me a little bit uncomfortable, even though my plane would roll over almost every other plane that's out there. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable because there's a certain responsibility that you have when you're going into these airports, which normally air traffic control is there monitoring you. So if you're in a civilian plane going somewhere with a normal airline, the likelihood that you're going to end up at a untowered airport is very, very unlikely, but it could happen. So you do get a little bit uncomfortable when you go, at least I do, a little uncomfortable when I go into some of these areas because there are people who will not say what kind of plane they are or what kind of altitude they're at, and start to make it hard as you try to figure out who it is and what they're doing. When you go into a busier airport, Chicago, Houston, LA, there's certain rules and ways of conduct, and air traffic control is there watching you, and you have to have a different level of experience in order to go in there compared to some of these untowered airports, which is what's going on right here. But then this pilot starts to do something which is super unprofessional, and why I think he might be in trouble of losing his license.
Georgetown Unicom, 1 o'clock.
Go ahead, Echo Alpha.
Yeah, what's going on with the runway here?
She's notamed out. She's closed till 6:30 tonight.
Oh, hell. They have to land anyway.
Now, this is a major problem on decision making. In case you didn't catch it, he said right here, I may just have to land anyways.
They have to land anyway.
Now, you can make some major mistakes in aviation, and believe me, because I have done them. I just had to write a report about one a couple weeks ago. But in this particular case, this program is designed to allow for when you make an actual mistake. And if you fess up and you tell the FAA before they find out that you did it, which luckily it's the government, so things move really slow. So it means if you make this mistake and you jump on quickly that same day or the next day and fill out this report and you send it in and you fess up on yourself, essentially what it does is it makes it so they can just say, okay, that mistake didn't happen. And the reason that they do that is because they want to gather information. If all these same pilots are making the same mistake because this guy over here in Phoenix is making this mistake and somebody over in New Mexico or in Florida is making the exact same mistake, they're able to collect all that information. So with pilots telling on themselves, they're able to say, oh, there's this trend going on where everybody keeps making this same similar mistake. So What can we do to prevent that from happening? And we can make the airways and flying safer. So by getting those pilots to fess up for that, they're able to get that, and as a reward for being honest and saying about the mistake you made, you can't be penalized for telling on yourself. However, there is a caveat, and I'm going to get into that in just a quick second, but as an example of something that I did back in the day when I was flying as a corporate pilot, I came into an airport and I was told to report a 5-mile final. So for this particular airport, for example, right here, I would have had to tell the tower, if there was one at this airport, that I was 5 miles out from the runway, and that would have allowed them to clear me to land because there were some planes doing some practice landings here. Now at the time, I was flying and the other guy was working the radios. It was very busy, and I don't remember what it was that was going on because it was like 10 years ago, but as we were coming in, we got really busy. For some reason, we were diving down or whatever. We forgot to report the 5-mile final. We come in and we land and we're rolling off down the runway. I remember it so clearly. We're rolling off right down the end of the runway, and tower says, hey, blah, blah, blah. I need you to go ahead and call me once you get in and set the brakes. And immediately my stomach sank and I go, we forgot to call the 5-mile final. And the other guy was flying with was like, oh man. So we both knew. I had forgotten because I was really busy doing my thing. He had forgotten because he was probably busy watching me try to do my thing to get the plane on the ground. Anyways, we both forgot, and it's on both of us. It's not like just because he was working the radios doesn't absolve me from being responsible, because we're both up there, and that's why you normally have 2 people to catch something. And normally that's how it works. But in this particular case, we both missed it. So we called the tower. Now we called the tower. They basically told us, hey, this is the situation. You guys forgot to call us a 5-mile final. The guy that was working the radios was saying, hey, this is my fault. Please, my name is so-and-so. Please put it on me. And so that was basically the end of it. I think they probably filled out a report, but immediately that night, we both filled out the report. So if you're mischievous, like me, and you have a mischievous mind, you might be thinking, oh, I can just go do whatever I want to do, and I can just go write this report, which is pilots refer to it as an ASAP report. Pilots, I can just go do this, whatever I want to do, write an ASAP report, no big deal. I can do whatever I feel like while I'm out here flying. And unfortunately, that's the caveat that I mentioned earlier. It doesn't work like that. Like everything in our extremely efficient government, this document lays out all the rules for which you cannot be in trouble. However, buried deep here in section 1147, things like reckless conduct and intentional conduct can't be included in this program. So I'm really sorry to ruin your plan, but you can't just load up your plane with bricks of cocaine like our boy Tom Cruise did here in American Made, or that maintenance guy that I talked about a few weeks ago, and then go fly it back to the US, land, and then write an ASAP report and go like, oh no, Kelsey told me if I made a mistake, it was no big deal, and just fill out my ASAP report and now they can't get you. That's not how it works, because that's intentional conduct, which is exactly what this pilot is doing by saying, I'm just gonna land here anyways.
They have to land anyway.
Now, this being an intentional act, he knew that it was closed from that guy that was telling him on the ground. Now, he missed the fact that it was NOTAMed out. And a NOTAM is a notice to airmen, again. And that's what this guy here on the Unicom frequency said.
She's NOTAMed out. She's closed till 6:30 tonight.
Now, in this guy's defense, the notice to airmen system is completely complicated, way more complicated than it needs to be. There's a bunch of information on there that you don't really honestly need, and the information that you do need could be buried deep into pages and pages of information, but it will tell you things like this airport is closed or this runway is closed from these hours to these hours. And I've made this mistake that this pilot has made. It happened to me a few months ago. We were going to a random place in the middle of the world in some weird airport, and they had a couple different runways, and I was thinking, oh, maybe we're going to be on this runway, but I had the third pilot. I said, hey, read these NOTAMs again just in case. Tell me if you see anything. And he's like, yeah, I think this runway is going to be closed at this time when we get there. And I grabbed the paper and I looked at it. I was like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. So we're not going to be on this runway. We're going to be on this runway. And that's an example of me making a mistake looking for NOTAM. I missed the NOTAM. I mean, I knew we were going to be able to land at that airport, but I just thought we were going to be able to do something a little bit different than what we were going to do. That pilot caught it. He found it. And I said, oh, okay, cool. So now we're going to be actually on this runway. It ended up that they ended up switching up everything at the airport anyway, so it didn't really matter about the NOTAM. But my point is that you can make mistakes, But then there's a difference between making a mistake and making an intentional action. But these NOTAMs, this is kind of what it looks like. You could just have pages and pages of all kinds of things that could be broken, and there's a lot of useless information on here. Sometimes I'll see something like birds in the vicinity of the airport, like, oh, there's birds outside? Like, it's stuff like that. And they don't even have a great sequence for it. It's not like, oh, closed runways right at the very top. This could be something that's really important for you to get there to land, and maybe something that's really not relevant, like birds in the vicinity of the airport could be at the very, very bottom where your brain has started to turn off things that aren't really relevant to what you're doing. So I don't know, when I'm king of the world of aviation, I'm going to change things all around and make it a lot better. And of course, there's going to be a tax. It's going to be a snack tax, or you're going to have to pay me in snacks when you go to my airports. But my point is that these NOTAMs, it's very easy to have something buried in there. So this pilot missing that it was NOTAMed out, I'm guessing he probably honestly didn't look, but that's just a guess. But it is possible to miss that the runway is NOTAMed out, so I don't blame him for that. I've done it before myself. What I haven't done is what he does here. Check this out.
Is this Buck?
Yes, sir, it is.
You don't have any beds in there, do you?
That's going to be on the county airport manager right there.
Well, 1 o'clock was landing runway 23. And Buck, I'm going to be overnight for a couple of nights here, so where are you going to be parked?
I'd rather you stop on the runway, turn around, and, well, I don't know if you can even get off the runway. They got it blocked off down there.
Okay, I'll do a 180 on the runway right here and taxi back.
Well, hang on.
It looks open.
I guess you can park it down there beside that 340.
Okay, I'll head down that way.
Now this pilot put this guy, which I'm guessing might be a friend of his, Buck, in a terrible situation. And honestly, when Buck first replied, when he started talking, I thought he was going to say something like, I wish you'd just like take off and get back out of here, because now you put me in this bad situation. When he says this right here, that's what I was thinking he was going to say.
I'd rather you stop on the runway, turn around, and, well, I don't know if you can even get off the runway. They got it blocked off down there.
Now, I don't work for the FAA, but I could imagine that they could look at this as a removal or a suspension of somebody's license or taking it away, because it's a very clear thing. He was unaware of the NOTAM, and that's fine, no big deal. But then knowing that that runway was closed, he decided to land there anyways. That's intentional. He made that decision. I didn't really care about the rules. I'm going to do what I want to do. And that type of decision making is extremely dangerous when it comes into aviation, because you might, in this particular case, obviously he was able to land, it was going to be fine, but the person that's going to make those types of decisions, people have habits and things that they find acceptable. And so if I'm flying to an airport with my 747, and in this particular case, there's some guy that's on the frequency, he's like, oh yeah, we closed that runway, and I go, well, I'm landing anyways. That's a major problem, and I would get in a lot of trouble with my airline. And even if I wrote my ASAP report, my airline might end up firing me, but the FAA could honestly just take away my license, because they'd say, okay, well, you knew that airport was closed and that runway was closed and you landed there anyways. It'd be one thing if you didn't know and you made a mistake, but that's not what this was. This was a decision, a conscious decision to break the rules and do something that you knew was not supposed to happen. Now, if he was in this position where he said, hey, I'm over this airport, I only had enough fuel to come in here to land safely, and I don't have another airport to go to because the weather's all around, and he declared a mayday and landed at this particular airport, that would be fine. But in this area, there's a bunch of different airports around here, so he could have easily gotten over to that place and landed over there. So it sounded more like a case of, I'm a very old millennial and I'm going to do whatever I want to do and nobody's going to stop me, which sounds like a disease that seems to be spreading through our society. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.